repeat for me the legends and the old folks swear are true, and describe for me the glory that was once this land of mine, and sing for me the old songs, take me back in time, and sing for me the old songs, take me back in time. Thank you.
What's it about? Natives losing their land and their freedom and their life. Anybody else? Jackson.
I wanted to say that first, but some of it almost seems like African Americans being brought into slavery.
Ah, so you've seen slavery, and you think slavery.
I thought that
Ricky?
I thought that until it said the king and queens thing. There wasn't no kings and queens in Africa, was there? I'm not sure.
In Africa?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Was, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
You could really be talking about lots of different peoples, not just one particular group. So if you think about all the wars that have been fought, all the people that have been taken over by countries that were bigger than them, it could be almost anyone.
Could be anyone. How about this side of the tracks?
Just a lot of those old cultures, they kept their history through stories and songs. It's like if we don't keep, teaching the children, the next generations, it can all be lost.
So you're saying it's also about some sort of sustainability of a culture from one generation to the next to the next. So you see it general, Nikki, or is it one specific group you think he was?
I thought it was more the Indians.
The Native Americans, okay. Anybody else? So we've got Native Americans, we've got possibly the Africans in slavery. We've got, could be any group. Anybody else? Anything jump out at? Oh, Harvey, in the back.
Yeah, I believe it could be not only just any, it could be any nationality, any group, society. It went through these changes.
It went through what?
It went through change, opportunity,
Change.
freedom, religion, and so forth. It had no certain, culture. It could be any culture. And through these songs, is how they kept their dignity. They were kept them going.
The songs kept them going. It's some interesting.
This last part, we're still losing all our children, they got the right to live. That jumped out at me because, like, today, like, I wonder if it's been changed at all by the Continental time. I don't think so, because we're still losing children today.
Still loose. So you're even looking at it as maybe something for the more modern connection that he wrote. All right. Anything jump out? Anything else in the song that jumped out? Any lyrics that you saw that either were powerful to you or that painted a photo, a picture, an image for you? Anything?
In the second verse where it says, left us to steal or starve or to leave, that really put in my mind the image of just the people being conquered, basically got screwed in whatever scenario it was, because they either get turned slaves or they're treated as dirt. So their existence from there on out is pretty well screwed.
All right, John, we got some interesting. He was in one of my sessions back in January. I don't think we got that kind of a response.
No, it's got a broader response, too.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so when did you write it?
When?
When? Remember the year?
No.
You remember the decade?
Well, no. It was the 80s.
The 80s. That era.
That era.
That era there.
Yeah.
All right, who'd you write it about?
It was written about the Irish.
Explain.
There is a key, if you knew Irish history, it talks about we fought for ourselves alone. Ourselves alone is the English translation of Sinn Féin, which is the political wing of the Irish Republican Army that fought the British, and is still fighting the British, up in Northern Ireland. The similarities are very much the same. I mean, the English took over Ireland. Henry VIII took it over in the 1500s, 1542. They didn't gain their full independence from England until 1949. The English thought the Irish were savages and less than them. And they came in and they brought in their English landlords to take over Ireland, basically. And they banned, in the schools, they banned the Gaelic Irish language. And they used the same, exactly the same policies with the Indians in this country when they came over as European Americans. It worked in Ireland, why won't it work here? You know, and they came and they talked to the Native Americans, the Indians at the time. Somebody said that Indians was translated from Indios, in God.
Mm.
And they said to the Indians, well, you have no concept of property or land. Isn't that wonderful? We do. and then they used the same policy. And they used the same policies in just about every nation they went to. You know? But more and more, when I sing this song, I do say it's written about Ireland, but the more I've been in this country, the more I got involved with Native Americans, I say it is about Native Americans. It applies to the Indian nations in this country as well. This song.
And first time I heard John perform, he did that song, and it just grabbed me because it does have such. I think what you said, Jen, is there's applicability. Obviously, there are specific references to the Irish in this, but it has applicability across lines, across countries. And one of the things sometimes we miss sight of is that when we talk about minorities and dominant group relationships, that sometimes in our country it always comes back to, well, it's always a race thing of white and black. And when we look across history, it's not necessarily the case. And even in this country, it hasn't always been that way. And even while it's been a racial issue, or there have been racial issues, there are ethnic issues. Growing up as an Italian in the Northeast, there were ethnic tensions, if you would, between Irish and Italians. There was also lots of love between Irish and Italians. My godfather married an Irish lady, but there were still the ethnic connections. And you're different than us, so therefore we've got to treat you different. We've got to make you. We were talking about this before class. The idea, and we're going to talk about more of this after John leaves. He's only going to be with us for a short period. What is civilization? What does it mean to be civilized? We're going to grapple with that particular idea, and that's, I guess, with the Irish. They weren't civilized.
No, the English.
According to
the English. And the English, and we're talking, when we say the English, you're talking about really the powers that be in England, the government. I mean, and the ruling class in England.
Good point, yeah.
Because they treated their own subjects, almost serfs, the same way, that they were less than, you know. The English ruling class had this idea of manifest destiny, that they were there to rule, and through Christianity. And that was and that everyone else was less than them, even the French, you know, even their neighbors.
Yeah. Anybody have any comments or questions?
And Africans too.
Why were you there performing? Just curious.
Because they paid me. That was called Solidarity Day.
Okay.
It goes back to the Poland, Czechoslovakia.
That's right.
Getting rid of the Russians, who were.
Okay.
Speaking thereof, right?
Yeah.
Sarah?
Who's that behind you?
I have no idea. I know Stevie Wonder was in the front row down there on the right. You can't see him in that photograph.
I just want to know, I thought maybe the president was maybe behind you.
No.
81, that would have been Ronald Reagan.
He didn't want nothing to do with that. And vice versa.
Washington was there, but
Yeah.
No, it was basically, it was AFL-CIO produced, which was a union, big union thing.
love it. Yeah.
I like it. 'Cause
Stole it from his Facebook page. So, it's good. I'm going to be using it a lot and just tell people that's me. Can't tell.
What's your backside?
I'm second from the right. That's it. Yeah. Do you want to just briefly, because I know you've got to leave. Just a little bit about your Oklahoma experience. He's in the process of putting together a concept album, and primarily it's going to be about the Native American plight there.
Yeah,
Correct?
yeah. My wife, I got into it because my wife grew up in Oklahoma. Was born and raised in Oklahoma on basically an Indian reservation, but it was a white town. The Indians leased the Osage Indians, and I'd never heard of the Osage Indians. You know, you've heard of the Cherokee and the Navajo and the Apache and the Sioux, but never heard of the Osage. And so I really got interested. She grew up with these people, used to babysit them. A famous family, they're a good Eagle family. She used to babysit these guys. And so she lived in a small town, Fairfax, Oklahoma, which has it was not the center of the Osage reservation. It's not the Osage headquarters, but they're all around it. And I got very interested in them, and I learned the history of the Osage. If I give a brief...
Yeah, make it brief. Yeah.
They were initiated in the Ohio Valley, moved because of wars with the Iroquois into Missouri, and they settled in Missouri, Arkansas, Kansas, Oklahoma. The hunting grounds stretched from eastern Missouri all the way to the foothills of the Rocky Mountains and down into Texas. Those were the hunting grounds. They fought the Apache, they fought the Comanche, and sometimes won, sometimes lost. They were a big impediment to the westward movement of the settlers. If you asked them permission to hunt and move through the land, they would gladly give it. Maybe for a price, maybe a horse, maybe a share of the game. If you didn't, watch out, you know. I mean, they'd kill you and chop your head off and put it on stakes to remind people who would come through what's going to happen to you if you don't ask permission. All they wanted was ask permission to come through our hunting grounds. You know. Well, in the 1800s, when the big movement was to remove the Indians from the East Coast, they wanted them removed, which is a polite way of saying wiping them out. You know, as you'll learn here. They seceded land to the federal government under pressure. They seceded 5.5 million acres in Missouri, which is about the size of Massachusetts. And eventually from 1808 until 1825, where they were moved to Kansas, and a reservation in Kansas which was 150 miles long by 50 miles wide. A lot of them died out, killed off. And then in 1870 they were finally moved because white settlers came in and just sat on their land. They just moved into the land, which was federally granted reservation land. White settlers just came in and said, well, we're living here now. And the federal government did nothing about it. So finally they were under pressure. They were moved. The land was sold to the white settlers, and the money from this land was given to the Osage to buy land in the Cherokee Reservation in what was then Indian Territory, now Oklahoma. It's one of the few tribes that was bought their own reservation. So that's where the Osage County is now, Fairfax, Oklahoma. In the 1890s, oil was discovered, and in 1907...
Oil was discovered on their reservation.
On their reservation.
The Indian
Vast amounts of
reservation.
oil.
That the government said they could have.
Well, in 1907, a chief called James Bigheart negotiated with the government for mineral rights. Very smart chief. And they got mineral rights.
The natives did.
So the Osage Americans got the mineral rights to the oil. So they received a lot of money, an annual, each family received annually a lot of money. They became the richest indigenous tribe in the world in the 1920s. And at the same time in Oklahoma it was very wild and woolly country. A lot of gangsters, early gangsters lived there because it was beyond the law. John Dillinger had a place there. He used to hide out there from the law and stuff. So a lot of white gangsters came in, and one guy decided that he wanted these oil rights, so he started marrying Indian women. And when he married them, and if they wouldn't give him the rights, he killed them. It was called the Reign of Terror. He and his buddies went around blowing up houses and murdering Indian women for the rights to the oil. It was called the Reign of Terror in 1921. It was the second case that the FBI they sent in undercover agents, and they finally broke the case. But it's like a movie, and it should be a movie, really. Witnesses were killed, witnesses were bribed, doctors, lawmen were bribed. This is in 1920s.
And there's still an old chief, isn't there, in his 90s?
Yeah, I was up there 2 years ago when my wife's mother was dying, and she passed on. And we were in the bank, the local bank, taking care of her last. She was part Cherokee, my wife's mother, taking care of business. And in this bank, I have to tell you, this bank, all around the lobby, a big lobby, are spurs hanging, over 250 spurs hanging on plaques. And this fascinated me, so I was walking around with the name and the date they were given. And I was looking at all these spurs and all the names, and some were ranchers, and some were cowboys, and a couple were desperados. There was a six come up there, said bank robber and desperado, And this is fascinating. And I'm wandering around, and there's two old Indians at the bank taking care of their business. And they didn't look Indian, they were wearing cowboy hat and jeans and cowboy boots or work boots. And I came back and they said, what are you looking for? And I said, I'm just fascinated. And they said, you ain't from around here, are you? I said, no. And he said, my spurs are up there. So he took me over and he showed me his spurs. And his name was John Tallchief, and he was the previous chief of the Osage tribe. He was there with his brother, and they were like 90 years old. You wouldn't think it. He was like a 70-year-old. He was a rancher. He was also had been a school teacher. He'd also been a basketball coach at the local high school. His land was taken from him during this reign of terror. His father was, cough medicine was poisoned by these guys. And they were sent to one of these Indian schools, to become white people. And they were brought from the Indian school one day, the 5 brothers there were, and they were ranging in age, and some of them could barely read or write, and they were brought, and they were sat down and given these papers, and they were made to sign the papers, which gave up the land, their father's land, for the oil rights. They took their hands and made them sign the papers.
And how old were they at that time?
He was probably 7 years old. His brothers were 8. He's the eldest, so his brothers were younger. The Tallchief family is famous around there. 2 of their relatives, Maria and Marjorie Tallchief, went on to become prima ballerinas, the first Native Americans to become world-class ballerinas, which was quite an achievement.